Hey friends, welcome back to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. I am your host, Jami. Today, we're going to be talking about a very different topic. We're going to be talking about RV life and what it looks like as a family of almost 10 to move into an RV full time. Now, this is a weird topic to be addressing here on the podcast, but it's what our family is about to do and has done in the past. And because of that, I get so many questions about logistics, pros and cons, all of that. So whether you are considering a crazy move into an RV like us, or you're just curious at what that looks like, that's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so before we jump in, I did want to give you guys one crazy huge announcement. We have our 2024 Finding Joy in Your Home online conference coming up at the end of May. The theme this year is building a fruitful home. And what we really, I've been wanting to do this theme for several years, but it's a harder theme to do because of the additional work that it takes on the speakers. But we have found some really incredible speakers this year that are teaching in this conference, and it's going to be amazing. So building a fruitful home is going to revolve all around practical hands-on tutorials for different handicrafts and skills and arts within your home. So if you've ever wanted to learn how to quilt, how to knit, how to crochet, how to do things like, what else do we have? We've got several food topics, really, really hands-on skills in your home. Someone's teaching a class on how to make homemade candles, like really great stuff. Arts and handicrafts and things that have kind of fallen out of fashion, but that we are ready to bring back and to be able to learn ourselves, teach future generations, these additional touches that are not necessary maybe for running a household, but that can turn a house into a home. And I'm so excited for this conference. Okay, so if you want to find out the details, if you want to sign up, head over to findingjoyinyourhome.com/2024 conference, 2024 conference, all one word right at the end. findingjoyinyourhome.com/2024 conference. You can find out all of the information there. It's going to be amazing. Now, another big change to the conference this year, which is really exciting, is that normally tickets to our conference cost between $40 and $60. And this year, we've made a major significant change where we are going to be hosting the conference right on our new app. So instead of a $60 charge, you can join us for just $12.99. We do have a special coupon code on that page to make it even cheaper. You can go check it out. But for $10, $11, you can join this amazing conference. Plus, you're not just getting access to the conference. Your $60 would normally just be access to the conference. You're also getting access to everything else we have on that app. So you can jump in right now with, we have a course on there on how to can. We have courses on using freshly ground grains. We have got audiobooks. The resources that are on this app is kind of outstanding. So head on over to findingjoyinyourhome.com/2024 conference to find out all those details. Okay, so let's jump in. So let me back up. I haven't even started. Let me start at the very beginning and give you guys a little story of our family, especially if you're new around here. Okay, so Jason and I have 7 children. We are currently pregnant with baby number 8, who will be born, Lord willing, in August. And back in, so it's 2024 right now, if you're listening to this currently, 4 years ago, almost to the day, we sold our house in California in 2020. This was not like a pandemic move. We actually our house had been on the market for an entire year. So by the time our house was closing in March of 2020, our buyer almost backed out of the house because she was freaked out about everything going on. We closed on our house March 31st, 2020, and we moved into our first RV June 2nd of 2020. So we also had a baby 3 weeks after moving out of our house. It was a whole big thing. Baby number 6. Kind of a crazy time, but we spent about 5 weeks renovating the RV, moved in June 2nd, and we spent almost exactly 2 years traveling full time around the United States in that small renovated RV. Then we were pregnant with baby number 7. We decided we wanted a little bit of an easier place to land. We were definitely outgrowing the RV that we had, and we didn't know what our next steps were. We didn't know where we wanted to buy land. We weren't sure, and we didn't want to rush a decision. And so we ended up renting a house, the house I'm in right here in Oklahoma, and we have been here just over 2 years. Now we are preparing in 48 days. I just had calculated that out. We are moving into our second RV. We're very excited about this move. We were actually hoping to make this move in September, to have the baby in this house, to be able to have a good month and a half recovery in the house. But our landlord had different ideas with not wanting the house to be on the market in September. So this summer will be a little bit harder than we had wanted. And actually, we're going to talk about that as part of the RV process. But we are moving out in June. At the end of June, we will be moving into our RV. We're going to be doing renovations on it. We're going to have the baby in August, and then we're going to figure out our next steps. So this will be the longest time we've ever been stationary in one spot this summer. We won't be traveling. We're just going to plant in a spot and get ready for baby, do the renovations, all that. And then in September or so, we're going to really figure out what our next steps are. So, and it will involve, Lord willing, we're hoping it'll involve some more travel. And also we're going to really be starting the land search. And what we think our plan is probably going to be is to move that RV then onto property while we build. And so we're looking at a good another 2 to 3 years in an RV while we are on land, buying land, building. We are not millionaires or anything. So we're going to be doing stuff very slowly as we have money to do them. And so we're kind of looking ahead at possibly another long haul in the RV or a fixer-upper where we're in the RV while we kind of gut a house. We don't know. We don't know what that next step is going to be. But being in the RV allows us to be mobile to make that decision. So that's a little bit of our timeline. So because of that, obviously, we get lots and lots of questions about RV life. We've also had a lot of people reach out and say, because of you guys, we've been really inspired to travel. And I just get questions all the time. So this episode is going to kind of serve as my RV episode for you. All right. So what we're going to cover in this episode is we're going to talk about the pros and cons, the different types. You can travel, you can be stationary. There's different reasons for wanting to move into an RV. We're going to talk about that. And then in part 2, which will be in 2 weeks, we are going to discuss the logistics of how do you actually make it work? What are finances of it all? What do you look for? All the logistics, which will be fun. Okay, so for now, let's talk first thing. Let's cover the different types of RV life. So we are actually hopefully going to be doing all 3 of these. First one is full-time travel. So this is where if your job, if you're able to work independently, that's what the biggest question we get asked is, what do you do for a job? My husband, Jason, runs our business here. Everything we do here at Finding Joy in Your Home, our conferences, our app, our bookstore, all of that, podcast. I just sit and record real fast and Jason does all the other work. He runs that all as our CEO. And so we are able to be mobile. He doesn't, have to go into an office. And so with the increase since 2020, with the increase of remote jobs, this is something that a lot more people are considering, because as long as you have an internet connection, which also has been easier in the last 4 years, then you can work on the road. And so there are a lot of families that are traveling full time on the road. Most people are not just living off savings as they do that. I'm sure there's some people who do. Most people who do it, though, are working remotely. Or working, or they own their own business. So that's kind of the first type is full-time travel. So for our first 2 years, we full-time traveled. We did not have a home base. We had my dad who lives in California, Jason's parents in North Carolina, and we would stay a couple weeks at a time on their properties, but nothing long-term, nothing longer than a couple weeks at a time. And we didn't have our own home base. We lived full-time in the RV. And when we were on their property, we were in the RV, not in their houses. And so that's the total nomadic full-time travel. The second type is where you're stationary. So you're in an RV, but you're in an RV park somewhere, or you're renting a spot somewhere. That's what we will be this summer, is we are going to be stationary while we rent a spot over summer. The third type is stationary while you're living on your own property, while you're building, while you're renovating, while you're doing something like that. So hopefully we'll get to that point of stationary living on our property. And then, of course, there's people who will do combinations where they have a home base and they take extended trips, but that's not quite the same as living full time. So when we were full-time traveling too in our very small RV in one vehicle, we were really, really limited on the weight. We couldn't just shove as much as we wanted. We had to be very, very careful with how much weight we were putting in because we were pretty much at max capacity. And so that causes limitations too when you're traveling full time of, you have to have your summer and your winter stuff with you all the time. You have to have everything you're going to need for the entire year. This time around, we're going to have a storage unit right here in Oklahoma while we're stationary right next to it. It's going to be really easy. We already have all of our newborn stuff in the storage unit. So when we move into the RV in June, I don't have to have all my newborn stuff with me yet. We can move that in and move stuff out as we want, being close to the storage unit. So there are definitely pros and cons with different types. So if you're considering RV life, just be really, really clear on what does that look like for what type of RV living you're going to do. And any combination, there are absolute pros and cons. So just be really, really clear on what they are. Okay, so we're just going to go through, this is just kind of a generic list of pros to RV living. Again, some of these will be dependent on if you're stationary or not. So traveling is much more exciting. Traveling gives you more reason for being in the RV because you're getting to visit new places, do new things. The flip side of that is traveling is extremely exhausting. It takes so much work to break down your campsite and move every 2 to 3 weeks. Some people move faster than that. Some people move slower. It is extremely exhausting, but it's also very exciting. Living stationary can make you feel a little bit more like, oh my gosh, I'm just in an RV. But you have a lot of bonuses with that too, especially if you have a storage unit nearby where you've got stuff, or you live near family that you can do laundry at their house. Like there can be a lot of pros of stationary living as well. So one of the biggest things that we will talk about more is just to be really clear on what your pros and cons are. Be really, really clear on that and have a very realistic view of what the hard parts are going to be and also what the good parts are going to be. So when we went into RV life, we went in with eyes wide open. And people always say, what was your biggest surprise, moving into the RV and traveling? And we always say the biggest surprise for us was how much we loved it. The biggest surprise was how much we loved the RV parks we were staying at. We didn't have a negative surprise. Now, that's not because there's not negatives to RV life, but it's because we went in with eyes wide open and we did so much research. We were really, really accurate on what the downsides were going to be because there are downsides, but we were very aware of what those were going to be. And so we knew they were worth putting up with. All right. So pros. What are the pros? Living in an RV, this is what a lot of people make the decision for, absolutely can come with decreased expenses. So just moving out of this house, and even though we're going to actually be renting an RV spot over summer, we're going to be saving tons of money this summer, just not being in our house. Traveling, we also did save money because we traveled extremely frugally. We'll talk about that. But it's absolutely been a cost saver for us. I'm going to talk about a con is that it's not always that case, but for us, it absolutely has been a cost decreaser. And so if you are really motivated, you want to pay off debt, if you want to save for a house, there can be some really great financial benefits to it. And that can be an absolutely huge pro that you're like, I'm going to take on these cons of smaller space, all the things, because there's just this absolute huge bonus of decreased expenses. All right. Number 2 pro is greatly simplified life. And as we have, being in a house, thinking about going back to tiny living again, Jason and I both really had to talk it out. Like, do we want to do this again? Is this what we want to do for 2 to 3 more years? That's a long time. Talked about all the cons. But one of the things now that we've been working on packing up this house, cleaning this house, is I keep going, I can't wait until my house is smaller, because cleaning it and organizing it and keeping up on it is so simple. Give me an hour and I can like scrub and completely clean top to bottom the entire RV. And it's amazing how simple life can be when you have so much less stuff, so many less toys, so much less clothing. And that's definitely a principle from living in a small RV that I have brought into a house then is keep things simple. Have less stuff than your space can hold, and you're going to be a lot happier. So greatly simplified life. I think there's a time and place for that. I am not a minimalist. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm a minimalist when it comes to not having too many toys overrunning the house, but I am not a minimalist. We have like 50 bajillion books and I want more. I love investing in beautiful dresses that I can wear. I like lots of prints and colors. I'm not about a staple wardrobe or whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about? Where you just have like a couple things and they're all neutral and everything goes together. I know people love that. That's not me. I have lots of kitchen gadgets that I love and that I actually use. I'm not a minimalist. I'm all about keeping things simple, but there are also seasons where going through a season of having things simple can be a huge blessing too. All right. Number 3, way more time spent outside. Way more time. I mean, when you just have your awesome little fire pit right outside your RV door, and you're able to just go, you've got great camping chairs. The kids are outside. When we were traveling, obviously we were at national parks all the time. But even being stationary, there's just a lot more opportunity to get outside, be outside. We ate, one of the benefits of traveling is that we pretty much tried to stay. Our goal was to stay in 70-degree weather all year long. So we never wanted to be too hot or too cold because we didn't even have a table inside our RV the way we had renovated it. So we ate outside on the picnic table 95% of the time. We did school out there. It was amazing. And so way more time spent outside for everybody in the family. Huge benefit. Way more time spent as a family. It was definitely, we felt like when we first started traveling, we really needed time from a really overwhelming season. We needed time to just kind of close in as a family, to be a family, to just have our nights around the fireplace and not have, or the fire pit, and not have so many outside demands for our time. That was such a huge thing that we needed at that time for us in that season. And community is extremely important to us. We have always been huge on hospitality, huge on community. But there, for a short season, there can be a time where you kind of need to close in on yourself as a family and really build those family bonds and that time together. And we really needed that. This time around, it's very different. We have our community. We have a very established community. We're not leaving everybody for 2 years and not seeing people much. So it'll be very different, but you still have that closeness as a family. It's still there kind of no matter how you do the RV life. All right. If you are traveling, the chance to see the entire country or even smaller pockets you've never been to. So we met a family who her husband worked for the state of California, and he had a lot of freedom within California to move around. So they spent like a year and a half just moving around California and traveling to different spots and areas. And I think that is very cool. Some people will stick more to just their area of the country. They won't go within, more than 4 or 5 hours away from home and kind of just stick around there. But I mean, no matter what, even just getting to go visit your local state parks more and get out a little bit more, even if maybe you are stationary, but once a year you take a trip, there are so many amazing opportunities to see so much. And for us, that is why we did it those first 2 years, was to be able to decrease our costs and to be able to travel. It just amazing. For us too, with traveling, the ability to see friends and family across the country frequently. We were able to see my dad in California, my siblings in California, Jason's family in North Carolina. I have a lot of family in Pennsylvania, and those are all very different parts of the country. And we were able to circle the country several times. And so we never really went longer than 6 months without seeing people. Or seeing our, core family. And then we also saw lots of friends, extended family on the road. We met my brother Jacob up in Idaho, where he actually proposed to his now wife while we were there. I mean, just some really, really incredible things that we got to do. And it wasn't that we were traveling and never saw anybody. We actually got to see people a whole lot more than we get to now because we're not taking trips all the time, all the way across the country. The next pro to me about RV living is it gives your kids a sense of flexibility and adventure. Obviously, if you're traveling, kids are very much having to get used to very long travel days. When we travel, a lot of times it's 12 to 14-hour days where we're just booking it. And it teaches everybody in the family really good lessons. But even just being stationary, there's so many great things to learn. You realize you don't need as much stuff as you think you need. And these are really good lessons to teach your kids as well. And then finally, for us, the ability to homeschool on the road has been incredible. We did a whole unit, our first summer on the road. We were staying in Oregon and Washington, and we were along the ocean several times. And we did a whole unit studies on ocean. And it was so amazing to get to actually study it and experience it. We took a little mini road trip. We just went down to Big Bend National Park in Texas. And on the way back up, we went through San Antonio and we went to the Alamo. So we spent time listening to podcasts and learning about the Alamo. The kids are reading books about it. And so we've got lots of things we want to do as we do more exploration this next year on the East Coast of Plymouth and all of New England, Virginia. There is so much history. We went to, my family lives really close to Gettysburg. My grandpa's like Gettysburg. He's been there a million times. He knows everything. So he did a big tour with us in Gettysburg, which was amazing. We went to Philly. We went to see the Liberty Bell. There's so much history that we can weave into our homeschooling then. So for us, that far outweighs, the ability that our kids can't be involved in soccer this semester because we're traveling. Who cares when we get to go to Gettysburg in real life? Like for us, it just far outweighs anything that we would be missing for that short time at home. And again, this conversation for us, especially with traveling full time, community is very important to us. And we think as Christians, you need to be in a local church. You need to be in that. And for us, this is not something we would ever consider doing forever. It wouldn't be like, oh, we're going to travel for 10 years full time. It was a short season that we knew that was going to be that season with in mind of we are going to be finding our forever place to settle. The second week we were in Oklahoma, we found the current church we're going to. We have been absolutely plugged in ever since. We've been members. We're so plugged in, and we knew that was going to be the case, that we were taking this short season to travel for something very unique. We still went to church almost every single week while we were traveling. There were some times where we were so remote or places where there was nothing that we would stream church. But most of the time we were still at churches, which was another huge blessing of getting to visit congregations and Christians around the country. We made some really incredible friendships doing that. But then now this time around, we will have our home base. We will be taking smaller trips, but we won't be traveling full time the way that we were. Okay, so those are some pros that come to mind. Let's talk about some cons. All right. It can be far more expensive depending on how you do it. So for us, it was definitely a cost saver, but it definitely can be way more expensive. Really in either way. What we've seen people do, and if you have the cash for this, I think it's amazing. But some people will go heavily into debt and then feel like they can never get out of RV life because they go out and buy a $90,000 truck, a $100,000 RV. They think they need to have the entire amazing whole setup, which, don't get me wrong, those setups are incredible. And if you have the money to do that, what an incredible blessing. But they'll go, have mega payments on these. They'll stay at really expensive places. And when you're traveling, there's very much the opportunity to spend a lot of money on eating out and excursions and doing all the things. And so what we really focused on is anything free that we could do. So we had a national park pass, which is $80 a year, went to every national park that we could, state parks, loved finding places like Gettysburg, like the Liberty Bell, places that are free or free with your $80 America the Beautiful pass. But we hardly ever went to museums. I think museums can be wonderful, but museums now, they are so expensive. And for our large family, I mean, some museums are $300-$400 just for one day at a museum. And so we did do certain things here or there, but for us, it was more about experiencing the country and nature and very selectively doing those things. But a lot of times you're not going to get as much out of a museum as actually walking the grounds of Gettysburg. We did do the Creation Science Museum and the Ark Encounter. 100% worth it. I will pay every penny. And those are not that expensive compared to a lot of places. We wanted to do the NASA, I forget the name of it now, the NASA thing in Florida, but I want to say the tickets were like $79, $89, something like that per person. And it was just too expensive. And so it's something that maybe one day we'll do. But when we were traveling, it just wasn't in the budget. And that's completely fine. I don't regret at all that we didn't do those things because we did plenty of other. I mean, we went to Niagara Falls. Like we got to do amazing things. So just remember that, like, you don't have to do all the things. Just because you're in Florida, you can take advantage of all the free beaches. You don't need to go spend money on all the touristy things. And if you do, that's wonderful. But you can do it a lot cheaper. You don't have to do all those things. And we hardly ever ate out. Hardly ever. Just like in regular life, we don't eat out very much. We didn't eat out very much on the road, but that is tempting because we do love eating out. All right. And the next negative, meal planning and groceries are certainly more of a challenge when you have a very small fridge, very small pantry space, a small kitchen. We really made do though in our small RV. People were like, how are you going to eat the same? And we just brought smaller amounts of what we already do. I had my grain mill. I had my Bosch mixer. I baked bread. I mean, we still ate like we do now. I just couldn't buy things in as large of quantities. So groceries definitely were more expensive on the road because I couldn't buy a ton of meat on sale and put it in the freezer. Things like that were definitely a little trickier. And I just really had to get my meal planning down well. And I had to have staples like dried beans, dry rice, those sorts of staples already in the RV. And I could easily whip up meals. So, the truth of the matter is, if you struggle with meal planning in a house, you're going to still struggle with it in the RV. So work on getting a few meals that you just always have in the pantry. You can fit more food than you think you can in an RV. And I think one thing for us is we don't store a ton of prepared food. So I'm not buying every week chips and crackers and granola bars and lots of bread products and lots of things that are pre-made that you're basically going to eat that week and then need to restock. What we do is we have dried oats and we have dried beans and we have sugar and we've got kind of the dried pantry staples on hand that we're then making granola bars and bread and all these things out of. And I think that really helped us in the RV because we were able to store those things and those I didn't have to buy every single week. I still bought 25 pounds of spelt. I still bought 10 to 15 pounds of beans at a time because they store so well, so easily that it made it, I think, a lot easier than if I was trying to store a lot of prepared food. I think we absolutely would have spent more, but I think we would have just spent more too because we wouldn't have had the space for it either. And we would have had to restock on stuff a lot more often. But in our house, I can easily go, grocery shopping once a month. We get our milk and eggs from a local farm. I can't do that in the RV. And so you definitely have to, like at one point, the farm that we get our milk from had a little bit of supply decrease over winter, which is normal. And before that, we were getting 6 gallons of raw milk a week. Right now, we're getting 4 gallons of raw milk a week. I can't get 6 gallons of raw milk a week in the RV. There's not enough room to store it. So there are definitely just things you kind of have to shift and change around. But just be aware of that. If you're aware of that, there's definitely good solutions that you can come up with. All right. One thing too, I think as the kids have gotten older in the RV, as I started learning and wanting to do new skills and hobbies, there's not as much. It's harder to branch into new hobbies within the RV. You just don't have the room. You don't have the room to store stuff. Right behind you guys over there, I've got this big hutch that has got a lot of our craft stuff. I have a bunch of crocheting stuff at the top. We've got a bunch of knitting needles and yarn and different loom projects the kids have worked on. We have a bunch of watercolor. There's a lot of random stuff in there. And it's okay if nobody touches it for 6 months because it's going to get used and someone's going to rediscover it. In an RV, you don't have the room for all of that stuff. So what we would do is kind of cycle through stuff, like whatever we were currently working on, we had a little space for. And then, you had to kind of cycle through. You couldn't just be like, oh, I found this thing on clearance and I'm going to pick it up, which I mean, that can be good sometimes, right? But also it definitely felt more limiting. Whereas when we moved into our house, I was like, I can get fabric for sewing. And, you get into that stuff. And as a homeschool family, we really like to explore those things. So for me, that's one of my biggest negatives moving back into the RV, is that I am going to be bringing my sewing machine and some of my quilting stuff. And my crochet stuff. So I will be bringing in like little amounts, like for quilting, I will only have the fabric for like the current project I'm working on. I'm not going to have a fabric stash. I'm not going to have, I'm going to have the one project. And then if I'm going to work on the next project, I will just buy the fabric for that next project. Right. And so that's my biggest thing is like, I like being able to have lots of our different homeschool materials and things at our fingertips. And you just can't as much. You have to plan it a lot better. Buy the stuff you're going to do for a unit. And then once you're done with it, it gets sold, given away, dropped off at your storage unit until you're kind of bringing in the next thing. So anytime you bring something into the RV, you also need to be getting rid of something else. Less ability for stable community, depending on how you're traveling. For some people who are total extroverts, this is going to be really hard. For other people, it's fine. We're pretty much a family of introverts. And while we all love our friends, we're okay going on a trip for a month. We're not like dying. But community is extremely important to us too. But one thing that we were really surprised about was the way that we traveled in Thousand Trails parks, which we'll talk about in part number 2, is the community of RV families is really wonderful. So if your kids, our kids were never bored and never without friends. Every park we went to, there's 30 kids playing at the playground. There are kids parked next to us. Like the kids were never without buddies. And with our large family, that's not as big a deal. Like our kids can all go to the playground and play together. They're not like bored looking for a friend. So all families are going to have different dynamics, but we do know there's families with 1 or 2 kids who travel very successfully because their kids make friends at parks. Okay. Next one. This one's a big one. This one can be really hard. There is less space to work if you need to work from home. This was one that we were constantly juggling. We did not have a workspace in our last RV. And that is actually one of the final things that we were like, we got to get out of this RV. We're done because we just did not have space to work. And so with this next RV, our bedroom is actually going to have a full door closed off and is going to have a desk in it. So that's going to be a really big change for us that was a non-negotiable. We're not doing the RV unless we can figure out a better way to work on the road. But that one is definitely one that you need to think through. And depending on your personality, Jason and I are pretty good now at like being like, hey, do you want to take the kids swimming for a couple hours? I'm going to get some work done. We do really well. We've figured out a good way to do that. And I know other people who struggle at all working from home because they can't handle if there's any noise going on. Right now I can hear that the kids are watching a show. Somebody was just getting a snack in the kitchen. I can hear that while we're recording. If you couldn't handle that, then that is a really big consideration for working in an RV. The work part can really make it or break it for a lot of people. Along with that is that there is an increased amount of noise that you just cannot get away from when you're in an RV. It's not noisy all the time. Our kids are much older than they were when we started traveling. There's a lot more calmness than there was when we first started traveling with 2 7-year-old boys and 2 5-year-old boys. And 2 more other younger children. The older kids are a lot more calm now, being 11 and a half and almost 9. But there's so much noise. So, but I don't know. I feel like there's so much noise in my house too. So I don't know. To me, that one just doesn't change a whole lot. And that's what I always laughed when people would talk, when we were first going to move into our RV and people were like, aren't you nervous? And I'm like, you know what? And my kids were much younger at the time, all of them. I'm like, everywhere that I am in the house currently, my children are with me. Like, I can't go just in my room like someone's following me or many people. So I just feel like it's not going to be that different. And it really, to me, didn't feel that different. My kids are always around me anyway. Someone's always in the kitchen helping. And so I just feel like that is not that much of a change. All right. Then the last one is, while the RV is easier to clean, it's going to clean so fast. It also gets messier faster. In 5 minutes, you're going to be like, why? It's like a bomb went off in here. But then it cleans easy. So, there's two sides to that coin. So those are kind of the quick pros and cons I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's other ones that I'm not thinking of. I'm sure when I'm back in the RV, I'll be like, oh yes, this thing is annoying. There's definitely more work involved. Well, you know what? There's different work involved. So when you're in an RV, you have to deal with things like your gray tank and your black tank. I didn't know what gray water and black water was. Gray water is what comes out of your sinks and your shower. Black water is your sewer. It's the same thing you have in a house. I didn't know any of that. But you have to empty those tanks. You have to deal with clogs. You have to deal with sewer buildup. There are some non-pretty parts of it, right? Things definitely break a lot easier in an RV. But there's a lot of things you deal with in a house as well. There's air conditioners that break. You know, it's just, it's different things that you end up having to deal with. Our hot water heater broke when we were traveling, and it was like a cap kept breaking. Jason replaced it like 3 times. It was so annoying. But we actually had our hot water heater explode when we lived in our house in California. So there's always repairs you're going to have. They're just different in an RV. And you quickly realize that there's things that you have to repair and keep up on. And they're just different. You're going to learn RV stuff a lot faster, right? So those are kind of pros and cons. So overall, as we wrap this up, in the next part 2 next week, not next week, we have a great interview. The week after, we'll be doing part 2. In that, I'm going to talk more logistics. How do you do it? Where did we stay? All that kind of stuff. But overall, here's what I want to tell you. If you are considering RV life, why? Be really, really, really clear on your why. What I hear from a lot of people is, oh, we wanted to remodel our house. We wanted to build, or, you know, whatever. So we thought this great idea, we're going to move into an RV while we do it. I got a month in and I hated it, and every part of it was terrible and it was all awful. And I had to do it for 6 months while we built our house, and it was so bad. I'm not downplaying that there wasn't hard parts, for sure. But what I want to ask is, or what I want to say is, but you got your house at the end of it, right? You got to remodel. You got to get out of debt. You got to, whatever that reason is, you have to keep that in perspective, because it's not, you don't get both. You don't get to live in your house while you remodel it and still do all, you don't get all, I mean, unless you're like an uber mega millionaire, then you can like buy $1 million house and renovate $1 million house, right? Otherwise, we live in the real life. You always have to make decisions, and you have to make sacrifices sometimes. So for us, traveling around the country was the greatest thing ever. And we had people that were like, that is so like, that's so amazing. But they're forgetting the reality is we were living in a 32-foot RV for those 2 years. Well, guess what? There was really hard parts about that. But those hard parts were all 100% worth it because of what we wanted to do. Now we're looking at this next round of RV life, and we are not going to be traveling like that. We're not going to have that insane benefit of being all over the country. And for us too, it wouldn't be experiencing it for the first time like it was the first time. It's amazing. This time around, we're going to be stationary. We're going to be in RV parks. We're going to be living the more boring RV life, right? But there's huge reasons why. We are paying off debt. We are saving for our future home. We're trying to find that dream property. There are huge mega reasons. So when I look to this summer, I feel a little bit nervous. I'm going to tell you that right now. I don't like the idea of being stationary in an RV park while having a baby. I feel a little bit nervous that August I'm going to be like recovering from having a baby, and we're in the RV. And Jason, we talked about all that, and we decided it is still worth it. It's worth it for what we want to do. And this summer, going through the hot 100-degree weather here in Oklahoma in the RV, it gets too hot and your RV just can't quite keep up, even though it can keep up really well. We're going to have some moments that are not fun this summer. My preference would not be to be stationary while we're having a baby in that RV. However, for our end goals, for what we want to do, it is worth it. And so when we look at that, we go, you know what? Bring it on. Because the end goal of what we want out of it, and the way that the timeline for this year shaped up, is not what we would have chosen. We would have said, hey, landlord, can we just stay in the house till September? He said, no, but I'll give you till June. And we were like, or you have to sign another year lease, which we could have chosen, but we decided not to. We didn't want to stay another full year. And so we thought, okay, then we're going to do the hard mode for this summer. And we're going to have a good attitude about that. We're going to be joyful about that because we're choosing to do this for a specific reason. Sometimes your reasons are not very fun. Sometimes you're dying in your current house and it's so expensive that you are looking for an alternative. Maybe it's not a super fun reason, but you have to keep that reason there. You have to remember that you're making this choice and there is a benefit somewhere. There is a benefit to it. And so it helps you to look at the hard parts in perspective. And a lot of times we want the benefit without any of the negatives. And that is not the way that it works ever in any decision that you make. If we went the easy route to say we're going to stay in this house through the summer and have the baby, great. That's making certain things easier. And it's making other plans and other goals and other things of ours way harder. And so no matter what choice you make, there are pros and cons. So when you're considering the RV life, look at those. What are the pros and cons? Be really straight up. Try to do as much research as you can. Troubleshoot. I mean, really look at what are we getting ourselves into? What are do we know what this is? Watch, there's so many videos of the cons of RV life, really look into it. And just know that my cons might be different than your cons and go into it with eyes wide open. You're not going to perfectly know everything, but go into it knowing there's going to be hard parts and there's also really big blessings. And so on the hard days when you feel like the house is too small and your kitchen is too small and the kids are everywhere, you look at the blessings too to say, we have more time as a family. We're going to go sit outside under the stars tonight. We are paying off debt. We are, whatever that is, keep that in perspective. Move forward in contentment, knowing that certain things are hard, but also certain things are better, and keep that in perspective. That is my absolute biggest piece of advice. We were extremely content when we were in the RV, not because things were perfect, but because we were able to keep that perspective. And we knew that there was hard things about it, but we're going to problem solve, and new problems would come up and we'd go, okay, how are we going to figure this out? So we already talked about, okay, it's going to be harder this summer being in really, really hot weather, which just means if it was 70 out, if it was this was the spring, I wouldn't feel as concerned. Well, I would be concerned in Oklahoma because that's tornado season. Let's say it's fall. Fall, 70 degrees out. The kids could play outside all day long. I would be less concerned that we're going to feel cooped up and kind of stir crazy, right? But we're going through the hot summer. So I said, you know what, Jason, we're going to do is we're going to find places inside throughout July and August that we can go walking. So we have a really great mall nearby. A big mall that we could go walking in the mornings there to get out of the house and go get active. I'm going to be very pregnant too, and I want to get active, but I'm not walking out there in 100 degrees. We have another little mall here. It's close by, but it's empty, one of those malls that's dead. And I'm perfect. We take all the kids, we put the babies in the stroller, and we go walk in loops around there when it's super hot. We're going to go to the splash pads once a week. Really, we're going to come up with a game plan. We're Lord willing, we don't have our RV spot settled yet, not by our choice, just because the RV parks are finicky about getting things pinned down for the summer. Lord willing, we're hoping to be in a spot that has a pool so that after I have the baby, Jason can take the kids swimming for a couple hours or, things like that. We started brainstorming and saying, okay, if we're going to be on hard mode this summer, what are some solutions to mitigate those things that maybe we're feeling a little bit it's going to be 100 degrees. No one's going to want to play outside. How do we mitigate that? So get creative, put your thinking cap on. There are many things you can do to get creative in situations, whether you're choosing RV life or RV life is being chosen for you, which happens sometimes, right? Then, just look at your perspective. Don't let your circumstances steal your joy and your contentment in those seasons. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up here. That next part 2 will be more of the logistics. It'll probably be a shorter episode. I rambled for quite a while on here. I get really excited about RV stuff. I got a lot to share and I never talk about it with anybody. Don't forget to check out our 2024 Finding Joy in Your Home online conference. The theme this year is building a fruitful home. It's going to feature hands-on tutorials on all kinds of handicrafts and skills within your home. And you can join us for under $12. Just go to findingjoyinyourhome.com/2024 conference to check it out. It is going to be May 28th through 30th. And you sign up before then, you actually get access to everything else that's on the app, which is hundreds and hundreds of items. I mean, courses, past conferences, audiobooks, the amount of training and stuff on there is just truly outstanding. So if you love this podcast, you will die over everything that is in that app. All right, head over to findingjoyinyourhome.com/2024 conference. All right, ladies, thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you guys back here next week for the next episode.